I never thought my son Michael could hide something so monumental from me. Not my Michael, the boy I raised, the man I thought I knew inside and out. But that night, as the rain lashed against the window panes and the old house groaned with every gust of wind, a single cryptic message on his forgotten phone shattered everything I believed. It wasn't just a secret, it was a chasm, a dark abyss that threatened to swallow our entire family whole. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat echoing the storm outside. As I stared at the screen, the words blurring through a sudden, hot haze of tears, this wasn't just about Michael anymore. This was about us, about the fragile facade of our perfect life, and the terrifying truth that lay buried beneath. My name is Eleanor Vance, and at 48 I thought I had a firm grasp on the tapestry of my life. A loving husband, David, of 25 years, a beautiful home nestled in the quiet suburbs, and our son Michael, a bright, ambitious 22-year-old, just starting his career in graphic design. We were, by all outward appearances, the picture of suburban bliss. But beneath the polished surface, unseen cracks were beginning to form. Subtle at first, then widening with an alarming speed. It started subtly with Michael. He'd always been a communicative child, sharing his triumphs and struggles with an openness that I cherished. But lately, a quiet distance had settled between us. His calls became shorter, his visits less frequent, and his eyes, once so full of youthful exuberance, now held a guardedness I couldn't quite decipher. I attributed it to the natural progression of adulthood, the inevitable pulling away as young men forged their own paths. David, ever the pragmatist, agreed. He's growing up. Give him space. But a mother's intuition is a stubborn thing. It whispers in the quiet hours, points out the anomalies, the tiny deviations from the norm. Michael, who once devoured my homemade lasagna, now politely declined dinner invitations, citing late nights at work. He'd always been meticulous about his appearance, but recently, his clothes seemed a little too worn, his hair a little too unkempt. Small things, perhaps, but they gnawed at me, a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. The night the message appeared, David was out of town on a business trip. The house felt vast and empty, amplifying the drumming of the rain against the windows. I was curled on the sofa, a half-read novel forgotten in my lap, when Michael's phone left carelessly. On the coffee table, buzzed. He'd gone out for a quick errand, promising to be back soon. Curiosity, a dangerous companion, nudged me. I knew it was wrong to look, a violation of trust, but the gnawing unease had grown into a desperate need for answers. The screen lit up, displaying a single, stark message from an unknown number. The money's due tomorrow. Don't mess this up, Michael. You know what happens if you do. My breath hitched. Money? What money? Michael had a good job, a steady income. He'd never been irresponsible with finances. A cold dread began to spread through me, a premonition of something far more sinister than a missed dinner or a messy room. I tried to dismiss it, to rationalize it away. A prank, perhaps. A wrong number? But the urgency in the message, the veiled threat, felt too real, too menacing. I scrolled through his recent messages, my fingers trembling. There were no other suspicious conversations, no frantic pleas for help, nothing to explain the chilling text. It was as if this single message had materialized out of thin air, a dark stain on the otherwise ordinary landscape of his digital life. I felt a surge of panic, a desperate need to confront him, to demand an explanation. But then, a different thought took hold. What if confronting him pushed him further away? What if he was in trouble and my anger would only make it worse? I deleted the message, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and a strange protective instinct. I would find out what was happening, but I would do it quietly, carefully. I would watch, I would listen, and I would uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The rain outside intensified, mirroring the storm brewing within me. The cracks in our perfect life were no longer unseen. They were gaping, and I was about to step into the abyss. The next few days were a blur of forced normalcy. I cooked David's favorite meals, listened to his anecdotes about his business trip, and smiled, all the while feeling a growing knot of anxiety in my stomach. Turmoil returned home, cheerful and seemingly carefree. He apologized for leaving his phone, attributing it to a rush. I feigned a casualness I didn't feel, asking about his work, his friends, fishing for any hint of what the message might have meant. He offered nothing, his answers vague and dismissive. Every late night, every hushed phone call, every hurried departure became a potential clue. I noticed he was spending more time in his room, the door often closed, a habit he'd never had before. Metallic sometimes lingered in the hallway after he'd left. Was it paint? Chemicals? My mind raced, conjuring scenarios both mundane and terrifying. One afternoon, the urge to search, to find answers was overwhelming. I knew it was wrong, a betrayal of his privacy, but the fear for his safety outweighed my moral compass. His room was surprisingly tidy, almost too tidy. His desk, usually cluttered with design sketches and art supplies, was clear. His laptop was closed. I scanned the room, my eyes darting from object to object, searching for anything out of place. My gaze landed on a small, locked wooden box tucked away on his bookshelf, half hidden behind a stack of old textbooks. It was an antique box, one I'd given him years ago, a gift from a flea market. He'd always kept his childhood treasures. In it, a collection of polished stones, a worn baseball card, a faded photograph of us at the beach. Why was it locked now? A shiver ran down my spine. The box felt heavy with unspoken secrets, that if I did, there would be no turning back. Instead, I carefully replaced the books, trying to make it seem as if I hadn't touched anything. The metallic scent, stronger now, seemed to emanate from a small sealed plastic bag tucked beneath his bed. Inside, nestled amongst some old art supplies, were several small, dark, irregularly shaped rocks. They looked like ore or some kind of mineral. I had no idea what they were, but they felt out of place. Alien in Michael's room. Later that evening, I brought it up to David, trying to sound nonchalant. Have you noticed anything different about Michael lately? David, engrossed in a financial report, grunted noncommittally. He's fine, just busy. I pressed on, describing the late nights, the closed door, the strange scent. Eleanor, you're overthinking this. He's a young man. He needs his independence. You're smothering him. His words, though, meant to reassure, only deepened my unease. He didn't see it. Or perhaps he chose not to. That night I couldn't sleep. The image of the locked box and the strange rocks haunted me. I knew I had to find out more. The next morning, I called Sarah, Michael's best friend since kindergarten. She was a sweet, sensible girl, and I hoped she might have some insight. Sarah, honey, it's Eleanor. He seems a little preoccupied. Sarah's voice was hesitant. He's been a bit distant. Mrs. Vance, he mentioned he's working on a big project, something secretive. He said it was going to change everything for him. A big, secretive project. The words echoed the ominous message on his phone. My son was involved in something he was keeping from us, and I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Sarah's words, something secretive, gnawed at me. My initial fear for Michael's safety began to morph into a more complex anxiety, a fear of the unknown, of what kind of secret could compel my open, honest son to become so withdrawn. I decided to delve deeper, to explore the digital breadcrumbs he might have left behind. It felt like a desperate measure, a further invasion of his privacy, but the maternal instinct to protect him, even from himself, was overriding all other considerations. I remembered Michael mentioning a new encrypted messaging app he'd been using for a group project. He'd shown me how it worked, boasting about its security features. While I couldn't access his phone directly, I knew he often used his laptop for work. I waited until he was out, then cautiously approached his computer. It was password protected, of course, but Michael, in his youthful overconfidence, had a habit of using variations of old, familiar passwords. After a few attempts, a combination of his childhood pet's name and his birth year clicked, and the screen flickered to life. My heart pounded as I navigated through his files. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just a lead, a clue. I checked his browser history, his recent documents, even his recycling bin. Most of it was typical. Design software, research for his projects, social media. Then, I found it. A folder hidden deep within a subdirectory labeled Project X. My fingers trembled as I clicked it open. Inside, there were no design files, no client briefs. Instead, there were spreadsheets, financial documents, and a series of encrypted chat logs. The spreadsheets were a jumble of numbers, but certain terms jumped out at me. Investment returns, initial capital. The figures were staggering, far beyond anything Michael could have legitimately acquired. The chat logs were even more disturbing. They were filled with coded language, references to the harvest, the yield, and hushed discussions about new recruits. The names of the participants were pseudonyms, but one name, the architect, appeared frequently, always in a position of authority, giving directives, demanding results. I felt a cold dread creep over me. This wasn't a legitimate project. This was something illicit, something dangerous. The metallic scent from the rocks, the vague threats in the message, it all began to coalesce into a terrifying picture. Was Michael involved in some kind of illegal mining operation? Or worse, a pyramid scheme? The thought of my son, so bright and full of promise, entangled in something so sinister, was unbearable. As I scrolled through the chat logs, a particular conversation caught my eye. It was between Michael under his pseudonym, Phoenix, and the architect. The architect, Phoenix, the new shipment is delayed. We need to expedite the process. The investors are getting restless. Phoenix, I'm doing everything I can. The local contacts are proving difficult. The architect, difficult is not an option. Remember, what's at stake? Your family's future depends on this. My family's future? What did that mean? Was Michael being blackmailed? Was he in over his head? The thought sent a fresh wave of panic through me. I quickly copied the entire folder to a USB drive, my hand shaking so violently I almost dropped it. I closed the laptop, trying to erase any trace of my intrusion, my mind reeling with the implications of what I had just discovered. That night, I barely slept. The words "your family's future depends on this" echoed in my mind, a chilling prophecy. I knew I couldn't confront Michael yet. I needed more information, a clearer understanding of the web he had become entangled in. I needed to protect him, but how do you protect someone who is willingly walking into danger? The digital footprint I had uncovered was just the beginning. I had a feeling the real truth was far more complex and far more devastating than I could ever imagine. The USB drive felt like a lead weight in my pocket, a constant reminder of the dark secret I now carried. I spent the next few days in a state of heightened alert, observing Michael trying to reconcile the loving son I knew with the shadowy figure of Phoenix in the chat logs. He seemed more stressed, more distant than ever. His eyes, once so clear, now held a haunted look, and he flinched at sudden noises, a nervous habit he'd never had before. It was clear he was under immense pressure. I decided to do some research. On the architect, the pseudonym offered no immediate clues, but the coded language in the chat logs, particularly the references to the harvest and the yield, sparked a chilling thought. Could it be related to some form of illegal resource extraction? The strange rocks I found in Michael's room suddenly made more sense. I started searching online, using keywords like illegal mining schemes, rare earth minerals, black market, and online investment scams with physical assets. The results were a rabbit hole of illicit activities, each more disturbing than the last. One evening, while Michael was out, I plugged the USB drive into my own computer. I needed to analyze the data more thoroughly, to find a pattern, a name, anything that could lead me to the architect. The spreadsheets were complex, detailing transactions in obscure cryptocurrencies and transfers to offshore accounts. It was clear this was a sophisticated operation, not some amateur scheme. The chat logs, however, held the most promise. I meticulously went through them line by line, looking for any slip-up, any real-world detail that might have been inadvertently revealed. Then, I found it. A fleeting reference in an older chat, buried deep within the archives, the meeting at the old mill near the abandoned quarry. It was a small detail, easily overlooked, but it sent a jolt through me. There was an old disused quarry just a few miles from our town, a place Michael and his friends used to explore as teenagers. It was a local landmark, a place I knew well. Could this be where they were operating? The thought was terrifying, but it also offered a tangible lead. I decided to visit the quarry the next day. I told David I was going for a long walk, needing some fresh air. The air was anything but fresh as I approached the quarry. A faint, acrid smell hung in the air, a mix of damp earth and something metallic, disturbingly similar to the scent I'd noticed in Michael's room. The old mill, a crumbling stone structure, stood silhouetted against the gray sky, its broken windows like vacant eyes. As I got closer, I noticed something new, something that hadn't been there during my last visit years ago. A freshly paved dirt road leading away from the main path, disappearing into a dense thicket of trees. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This was where Michael was going. I followed the road, my steps cautious, my senses on high alert. The trees grew thicker, the light dimmer, and the air grew heavy with the same metallic scent. After about 10 minutes, the trees opened into a small clearing, and there it was. Not a mining operation, not a pyramid scheme, but something far more bizarre, far more unsettling. In the center of the clearing stood a makeshift laboratory, a collection of tents and tarpaulins, covering strange humming machinery, and at the heart of it all, under a powerful spotlight, was a massive, pulsating crystal glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. Around it, several figures in hazmat suits were meticulously working, their faces obscured by their masks. One of them, taller than the others, with a distinctive limp, turned towards me. It was the architect, and as he raised a gloved hand, I realized with a sickening lurch that he was not a stranger. He was David. The world tilted on its axis. David, my husband, the man I had shared my life with for 25 years, the father of my son, was the architect. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. The hazmat suit, the limp, the authority in his stance, it all clicked into place with a horrifying clarity. And Michael. Michael was his accomplice. I stumbled backward, a gasp escaping my lips. David, or rather the architect, froze. He barked an order and two other figures in hazmat suits moved towards me. Panic seized me, a primal urge to flee. I turned and ran, blindly crashing through the undergrowth, the sounds of their pursuit echoing behind me. I didn't stop until I reached my car, so violently I could barely insert them into the ignition. The engine roared to life and I sped away, leaving the nightmare of the quarry behind. But the image of David, standing there, a stranger in a hazmat suit, his face hidden, his true nature revealed, was seared into my mind. Back home, Lee. Every photograph, every shared memory, every tender word now felt tainted, twisted by this monstrous deception. I looked at David's empty chair at the dining table, the newspaper still folded beside his coffee cup, and a wave of nausea washed over me. How could I have been so blind? How could I have lived with this man, shared my bed with him, raised a child with him, and not known the darkness that lurked beneath his calm exterior? Then Michael arrived. He walked in, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a strained tension. He saw the USB drive still plugged into my laptop, the open folder on the screen, and his face drained of color. "Mom?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "What have you done? What have I done?" I echoed, my voice rising, laced with a bitterness I didn't recognize. "What have you done? Michael, what have you and your father been involved in? What is that thing at the quarry?" He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. What could possibly justify this? The lies, the secrecy, the danger? I demanded, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and despair. "And what about the architect? Who is he? He's not who you think he is, Mom. He's trying to protect us. To protect you." His words made no sense. Protect me? From what? From whom? The more he spoke, the more convoluted the story became. He spoke of a rare, unstable mineral discovered by David years ago, a mineral with incredible energy potential, but also with devastating side effects if mishandled. He spoke of a secret organization, a shadowy consortium that wanted to exploit the mineral for nefarious purposes, and how David had been trying to stabilize it to harness its power for good, to keep it out of the wrong hands. He claimed that investment was for research. The new recruits were scientists, and the shipment delays were due to the extreme volatility of the material. I listened, my mind struggling to process the fantastical tale. It sounded like something out of a science fiction novel, not the reality of my suburban life. Whirled from an unseen threat? And then, he dropped the final bombshell, the architect. He's not just Dad, Mom, he's also me, my head, reeled to architects. My husband and my son sharing a dangerous secret identity, risking everything for a cause I couldn't comprehend. The truth, when it finally unveiled itself, was far more bizarre and terrifying than any simple betrayal. It was a labyrinth of deception, a web woven with good intentions and dangerous consequences, and I was trapped within its intricate threads. The revelation that both David and Michael were the architect shattered the last vestiges of my carefully constructed reality. The man I loved and the son I adored were not just liars. They were living a double life, a life so far removed. From the one I knew that it felt like a cruel joke. The days that followed were a tense, suffocating blur. David, when he finally returned from the quarry, his face etched with a weary resignation, tried to explain. He spoke of a breakthrough, a way to neutralize the mineral's volatility, to finally end the secrecy. But his words were hollow, lost. In the chasm of my betrayal, I couldn't look at him, couldn't bear his touch. The man I had loved was a stranger, a phantom who had been living in my house, sleeping in my bed, and I had been completely oblivious. I felt a profound sense of loneliness, a desolation that went deeper than anger. I had been a pawn in their game, a bystander in my own life, and the realization was a bitter pill to swallow. Michael, too, tried to bridge the gap. He brought me tea, sat with me in silence, his eyes pleading for forgiveness, but I couldn't find it in my heart to absolve him. He had chosen to follow his father's path, to embrace the secrecy, to lie to me. He had become a stranger, too, a young man I no longer recognized. The final confrontation came a week later. I had packed a bag, a small suitcase filled with a few essentials. I couldn't stay in that house anymore, a house built on a foundation of lies. David found me in the hallway, my hand on the doorknob. "Eleanor, please," he begged, his voice raw with emotion. "Don't go. We can fix this, I repeated, my voice a cold, flat monotone. "How can you fix this, David? How can you erase the years of deception, the lies, the danger you put our son in? I did it for us, Elle," he insisted, his eyes welling with tears. For our future, the mineral, it was a way out. A way to secure our lives, to give Michael everything he deserved. And what about what I deserved? I shot back, my voice finally cracking. Did I deserve to be lied to? To be treated like a fool? To live in a fantasy while you played God in some secret laboratory? Michael appeared at the top of the stairs, his face pale, his eyes red-rimmed. "Mom, please," he whispered. "Don't leave. We need you. You needed me," I said, turning to face him. "You needed me to be ignorant, to be compliant, to be the perfect, unsuspecting wife and mother. You didn't need me, Michael. You needed a prop for your grand secret life." I opened the door, the cool night air a welcome relief from the suffocating atmosphere of the house. I looked at them, my husband and my son, two strangers united by a dangerous secret, and I felt a profound sense of loss. I had lost them both, not to death, but to a truth I could never have imagined. As I walked away, the sound of their pleas fading behind me, I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I had to leave. The fallout from their secret life had been devastating, a nuclear winter that had frozen my heart. But as I drove into the darkness, a single, defiant thought took root. I would survive this. I would rebuild my life, a life based on truth, on honesty, on my own terms. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was my own.